You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Hey girl, hey, welcome to the Rich Life Revolution. I'm your host, Michelle, and today in episode 56, we are talking to my guest, Kamakshi Hart, on embracing the transformative power of nature. Now, this comes hot on the heels of my interview with Dana Harvey in episode 53, where we talked about microdosing and the psychedelic journey. So that was all, nature-based plant medicine, all that jazz. And today we are diving in with Kamakshi Hart on how we can embrace that transformative power of nature. You know, our lives these days are inundated with to-dos and expectations, and just generally trying to survive in a world where we're hit with one crisis after another. God forbid you turn on the news, hey? Well, it's no wonder so many of us feel our mental health being stretched too thin and exhaustion taking over more and more. The great news is that there's a free resource that we can all embrace that can help ease these stressors if we only open ourselves up to possibilities. You know me, I'm all about the possibilities. What's that resource? Nature. In today's episode, I dive deep into this concept with Kamakshi Hart, who is a spiritual psychology practitioner and coach who guides her clients through transformations from trauma with nature based rites of passage, introspective conversations, and hanging out with horses, which is one of my favorite things to do. As Kamakshi says, our true nature is nature. And I personally can't agree more. So let's listen. Hey, Kamakshi, so good to see you.
Great to see you, Michelle. This is so exciting.
It is so exciting. We met in a podcast group and I just loved what you were saying. And I thought, wow, you would be such an inspirational guest for my audience. So I'm glad that we were able to connect and hop on this call. So I want to invite you to take a moment and brag about yourself.
Okay. Well, I like that question. That's a good one. I excel in assisting people in transforming their lives. And I am very proud of the work I've developed over the years because I've sourced it from me, my intuition, my inner guidance. And at every turn, even though, I can still get into those comparisons with others like we all can, I still know it's what I have to do is find my own path and my own way. I get while getting inspired by what others are doing. So years ago, I felt this desire to take people out onto the land and develop rituals and ceremonies and rites of passage that I later found, unknowing to me, there was like all these other people doing it, and I didn't even realize that. So it was my own personal affinity and call to nature. And I have that. I have this deep attunement to nature, and I always have. So no matter the obstacles, I have persevered. And that's another thing I brag about myself. I'm tenacious and I have lived transformation. And I also am a deeply caring devotee, I guess you would say, of the natural world. And I love to share that with other people. And I see it work. I see it's worked for me. That's the other thing. I don't share anything that I haven't done myself and seen the results.
I love that. And I don't know if you remember in our conversation, but I have a very strong connection to the natural world because that has been my grounding source. Like that, it truly has been the way I have navigated change in my life from a very young age. And it was just a thing that I just did to make myself feel better in
times where I didn't feel safe or I didn't feel secure. And I always found like there was this kind of like seasonality for me that like I could flow with the seasons. And when I kind of relaxed and leaned into that natural rhythm, I saw so much more abundance in my life. Instead of trying to like push through, muscle through, like, it's winter and I don't feel like going outside. So let's not. Like, let's not just try to do it anyways. Let's try something else. Or, for example, this winter, where I live, it gets dark in the winter around 4 o'clock. So I like to be outside every day in the woods with my dogs for about an hour and a half. That's how I regulate my nervous system. And in the summer, I do that in the evening because I like the evening, the warm evenings. But in the winter, I don't like to be out in the dark with my dogs. And so I have to block an hour and a half during the day. And so it's like just adapting to what nature is giving us as our present moment and making it work, right? Instead of trying to artificially manipulated, I guess, is what has worked for me. And so when you talk about this, I was like, oh, I like what this lady's throwing down.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, I can relate to so much of what you just shared, and that it tells me so much about your level of attunement within yourself. And I can relate exactly to being younger and not even knowing why I was longing to be in nature. And I have this specific memory of being probably around 17, and I had a lot of trauma going on in my world. So, like you, it represented safety and not the other way around. Like I felt more safe, with the trees, than people. But I also had this natural inclination. And I remember sitting on a picnic table in this little park and sitting so that I positioned myself exactly so I could see nothing man made. And I used to do that all the time. And I didn't even realize it until I remembered that one day, that I didn't even want to see a telephone wire or telephone pole. So I would try to find, even if they were over there, just to be able to gaze, which is a meditation practice. And I didn't even know I was doing it, is gazing at beauty. So, and then the part about the seasonal awareness, that just also says such volumes of you and how sensitive you are in your inner being. And I observed from a young age, especially around the holidays, Christmas time, and it's carried through me my whole life. Like people get busy, busy, busy. And I hear people like, oh my God, I have so many parties. Oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, I often feel like, am I the only one that's like really just wants to chill and slow down?
Yeah, like hibernate. And it's so funny. I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and it was around like the December kind of January time, and she's like, I just don't feel like I'm not resonating with this whole like New Year's resolution thing. I said, because it's not our new year. Like, that is not the time to be, forming these plans and starting something new in January. Like, that's a hibernation for me, right? In the Northern Hemisphere, like, I am deep in hibernation mode. And around now, like we're recording this in March, now's the time that I start to feel a little bit more like, oh, I feel a little bit more creative. And all of the hibernation time that I take, the ideas start to kind of blossom. Do you find that when you're working with people and for yourself?
Well, I definitely seek to guide people in those awarenesses. So, because like you, I've always been attuned to it without even realizing it when I was younger, and I didn't get it till later. But I like to think of the Chinese Lunar New Year as like the kind of lean in, and then like you're saying, March, we're approaching the spring equinox, and so that is the rebirth, that is the beginning. Astrologically, when the sun moves into Aries, that's the beginning of the new year.
Totally. And I love that, right? Like that to me feels really aligned. But I spent many years in almost like in denial of that and in trying to fit into this calendar cycle that has been created for us and really struggling and not understanding like why do I feel off all the time?
Yeah. The weariness of the world is that it's been designed since whenever. I mean, it's gone back a very long time, even more with the Industrial Revolution. There was that constant output that we've been programmed into. And so we get these little micro holidays that are scripted, they're calendared, like, oh, you get a 3-day weekend because it's President's Day or Memorial Day, and it's like pent up energy. And then people want to go, but there's nothing regulated about that. It goes along with our, binge purge culture, like either you're going to just like go and kill it on the weekend and then whatever, or it's a nonstop production consciousness or unconsciousness rather than moving with the harmony of the seasons, like you said. And with electric light and technology, we literally can go 24/7. It's well documented that it's not serving anyone at the mental health or emotional health or physical health levels.
Oh, completely. I completely agree. I was having a conversation with my brother a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about grounding, right? He was watching this show on Netflix about, like walking in bare feet on the grass and stuff like that, right? And he was like, these people, they talk about this being like, so beneficial to their health. And he's going through some health stuff. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's why at any given chance, I don't like to wear shoes and I'm out there in the grass or just on the dirt or whatever and like just stand there for a minute. I've just returned from a trip to Easter Island and we were the big head statues, they're called the Moai, and we went to see them in this field and I just like sat down on the ground, right? And took my shoes off. I sat on the ground, put my hands on the ground, and people were like, "What are you doing?" I said, "You have to absorb the energy of this sacred space. Like this is incredible. Like this is awesome." And so all of a sudden, everybody's sitting on the ground, right? And they're like, "I want to absorb the energy too, Michelle." So it was
Oh,
kind of funny.
I love it. It can be so inspiring to go somewhere where the energy is extra powerful, like a place like that. And a lot of the practices that I recommend for people is finding a sense of place as well in your own backyard, in your, somewhere nearby where you can connect on a regular basis so that you're developing that relationship with the trees, the birds, the creatures. And there's a level of opportunity for us to not only receive the blessing of nature and how good it feels and how relaxing it can be, but to give back. And one of the ways we can give back is we can send our love back to a tree, back to the birds, to the land. And with how, as we all know, it can be pretty overwhelming these days with climate change and the loss of habitat for wildlife and the loss of wild places, and trees are being cut down all day long every day. And so to manage, for people like myself and others who are attuned to that, that's one of the things that I choose to do. I go out for a praise walk, it's called, and in the morning is a great time, but you can literally do it anytime, doesn't matter what time of day it is. And it's really giving gratitude and love to the flowers and the plants and the dirt and the everybody, the squirrel that runs by, all of it.
Oh, I love that.
And I just say you could do it quietly, but I often will do it out loud. I like to sing, so sometimes I'll sing songs of gratitude, but I often will just do it really playfully, like because the flowers are starting to bloom where I live. We've had so much rain, the wildflowers, and I'll just be like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful."
I love that. Oh my God.
And then sometimes I'll just walk along and say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you."
Oh, that's so good, right? Because I talk about the power of gratitude a lot, and how to me, it's a game changer. It's a life changer and such a significant part of transformation. And sometimes people are like, well, okay, I can sit there in the morning and do three things I'm grateful for in my journal or whatever, right? I'm like, but you gotta feel it. Otherwise it's just words, right? You gotta feel it, and we can have gratitude for anything. And so, being out on a walk and just saying, wow, flowers are so beautiful, right? Or love these trees. This is amazing. I feel so grateful to live in this place that I'm at, or looking out into the ocean, whatever it is, right? I love that idea. You call it a praise walk. That's so good.
There's a book it's sold many, many copies now. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's by an indigenous woman named Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's also a scientist. And one of the things that she really draws forward so beautifully in her book is it's very much an indigenous practice of seeing a tree as a being, which I believe they are. And so it's like in indigenous culture, they often speak of all my relations. So that includes literally every sentient being, and seeing the world as, like in French and Spanish and Italian, they all have the feminine forms and the masculine forms of words. And so they literally will say that a chair I don't know exactly, I don't remember, but like a chair is masculine and a window is feminine. But if you take that over to the trees and the flowers and the plants of all kinds, for years, when I first moved to where I live now, we have these beautiful coast live oaks, and they're just gorgeous. And I started having this practice of asking them their names, and then dialing into whether and picking up whether they had a feminine feeling or a masculine feeling. And then I would sit at the bottom of the tree and ask the tree to share the tree's wisdom with me. And I would just sit and, I mean, I still do it, but sit and journal the answer. And it's an amazing practice of attuning to something that I believe I could have this wrong, but I think it was a writer named David Hawkins, but he talks about the more than human others. So they're the humans, and then they're the more, he doesn't call them, like, he doesn't put them in a lesser than category. He puts them in a more than human, a greater than, because many people feel the vibration of the beingness of the plant world and also the animal world is actually a higher vibration, because they're not so bogged down with all of our mental, and all of our stuff. They have like this pure being vibration, which is why we feel so good in their presence.
Absolutely. I have two golden retrievers, and they are just the most empathic dogs I've ever had. I've had lots of dogs, and they all have their gifts, and these two, they just know what's going on. And I always look at them, I'm like, you are just pure love. Like you got nothing but love going on. And so this is a great segue, right? Because you also work with horses in your therapeutic practices, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that was a perfect segue, because horses' hearts are about 5 times bigger than a human heart.
Really?
Yeah. So when you're with a horse, and I've seen there's diagrams of it with people that do more energy healing work with horses, where they'll show like this aura of a horse, and it goes way, way out there. And then the humans is like just so much smaller. So if a human hanging out with a horse is being totally encompassed by that heart energy. And that in and of itself, because of that frequency, which has been studied, like places like the Heart Math Institute, where they apply science to these things, if you're tuning in, because you can choose in or choose out, right? There's a lot of people that do things with horses where they just making the horse do what they want them to do. They're not tuning in. And then the horse sometimes isn't really happy. They'll just shut down. So, or partially shut down. But if you're in a receptive field, the horse is going to, pick that up instantly. And horses, if you observe horses love to hang out. They're like specialists in hanging out. And they hang out in their herds. They just like to stand around. When they're younger, they're a little more bouncy and prancy. But horses you can give them, I mean, it's better to have room to move around than being in a little tiny stall. But even when they're in a big open pasture, you'll see them standing most of the time. And they'll be with each other. And so what I've learned having two horses is when I just go hang out with them, and that's a lot of what I do is I invite a client to come into that space and hang out with them. And truly magic happens in that space because the horses love it. They absolutely love it. And they respond. And then they feel safe. And for somebody who's like, I work with people who are seeking to heal unresolved traumas. And sometimes they weren't fully aware of it and it comes up or something, so creating a safe space is everything, to feel like you can open up enough to receive. And a lot of that is a very unconscious holding. It took me years as a trauma survivor. I mean, I have complex PTSD. I had multiple traumas from childhood and all the way along for years. And even with like all the years I've dedicated to self-study, self-awareness, healing, you name it, I reached out for help in all directions and been a really dedicated, like super dedicated student. And still I get blown away sometimes by the wiring that just got into my limbic system, literally from that fight, flight, freeze state of the sympathetic nervous system. I didn't even know the words sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system back when I was like in my late 20s. And I finally found yoga. And then I moved into a yoga community, which was in nature. And I was drawn to all of these things and didn't even know that I was drawing myself toward the things that would help me self-regulate and start to rewire. And then as years passed, and then I got this master's degree in spiritual psychology, and then I started to really go, oh, oh, that's what I was doing. I was pretty smart. But back to horses. I am a deep lover of all things four-legged and winged and everything. So I didn't grow up with horses. They came into my life later with my current husband. And it just is such a natural to experience them as healers, And again, that we can be in this reciprocal relationship with them as well, because that's what I see with nature and horses is that we all benefit from feeling that we are also being of service while we are receiving. And they both have that kind of, whole gestalt experience in that way, if that makes sense.
Totally. And, I have done a horse retreat, an equine retreat. And the thing that came up for me, so we went out into the pasture with the herd of horses, and I realized I so badly wanted to have one of them come up to me, like approach me, right? And they weren't. And I had this whole story going on in my head about like, why won't they come to me? Why are they going to everybody else? And so I just sat down in the field and like cried basically because I was like, this is my life. I want all this stuff and it's not coming to me. Like, what's wrong with me? And it was such a transformational experience. The horses gave me what I needed to see, even though they didn't approach me whatsoever, right? Like they wanted actually nothing to do with me, but they gave me exactly what I needed to be able to see something that was stopping me, like a belief that I had that was stopping me from really living or like creating the life that I wanted to live. So it was very powerful. I really encourage listeners that if this sparks your interest, like lean into it. I love horses. I've horseback ridden for many years. I love being on horseback. I find it just so much fun. But I don't like feeling like I'm taking from the horse. It kind of feels one-sided with me on its back and, that kind of thing. But I love the energy of the horses. And I think it's just so interesting what we can learn from animals. And I think so often we think, oh, well, we're the smart ones, we're the humans with the big brains or whatever, right? And it's like, no, actually, they're the smart ones. They don't have all the shit in the way of their experience.
Exactly. It's totally true. And that's one of the things they have to teach us. And of course, we have to choose to be open to it. But it's the wisdom that's available, and whether in nature or with horses. And as some people have said, that horses can be a gateway to the natural world because they are, and many people think of them in relationship to the barns they're in, or what style of riding, or all the different kinds of competitions that horses do, and they provide for people, like you were saying. But in their essence, in their beingness, they're of nature, and so are we. So are we. Our true nature is nature. And I think the reawakening the work of being in the wild through, and it can be simple wild. Like, I live next to a really big state park in the Santa Monica Mountains north of Los Angeles. It's the largest wilderness area adjacent to a major metropolitan city in the world in terms of the number of acreage. And many people use it. It's all called a recreation area, right? That's what they often will call these, in a state or national language. And there's a lot of people who just go, they recreate. It doesn't mean that they're like, oh, cool, I get to go outside and go hiking or biking or what have you. But are they letting it change them? It's like what you said earlier about the seasonality of, and being in those cycles of, when do I need to slow down and be more quiet to regulate my nervous system. It's great that people want to get outdoors, for sure, but are they feeling earth connected and letting it then connect them to themselves? So that's what I do small groups and take them out in the park, and I take people out to watch the sunset and the full moon rise, because once every month the sun sets and the moon rises. It's exactly the same time, and it's so awesome. And how many people put it on their calendars to actually go and check that out, every single month. And it can be spectacular. So we have this profound lunar event once a month that is gorgeous.
Yeah, and many people don't know.
No, and then and people think, and people will say, "Oh, it's a full moon hike." I'm like, "It's more than a hike." Yes, we're gonna hike. It's a lot more than a hike. Yeah, when you open up to what's possible, and so that's why, for me, I've always resonated with transformational, because it is, transformation means to change, and to change the way we're looking at things, like mindset, perception, changing the way we're feeling about things, which is heart set. And as you well know, because I know the work you're doing is very transformational, it's like you literally start to change form, transform. You're changing the form.
Yeah, because a lot of people think they have to change the outside and then inside will change. And I always say it's the other way around, right? Like it starts from within, and then you will see the external, the money, the things, the whatever that will come from the internal change, right? The internal shift. It's not external to internal. You don't feel better because you have more money or you have a bigger house or a nicer car. You will get those things when you decide to feel better, right? And you do the work to feel better. Yeah, it's so interesting. As you were talking, I remembered many years ago a friend who lives in the prairies in Canada. And so the prairies, they don't have a lot of trees, right? And I live in British Columbia, and she was out in BC. We were at a retreat, and she was talking about she was going to go on a forest bathing walk. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, like the Japanese practice of forest bathing. I'm going to go do that this afternoon. And I was like, you're just going to walk through the forest? Is that like, what are we talking about? Right. She's like, well, yeah. And I think, they walk you through kind of like a walking meditation and stuff. Right. And I'm like, this is great. What are you talking about? This is crazy to me. But I realized, like she said, well, this is your everyday life. You walk through the trees every day. I don't. I'm in the middle of the country where we don't have trees. It's just prairie. It's like fields of wheat kind of thing. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I never kind of thought about it that way. And then I looked up, I can't remember what it's called. There's like obviously a Japanese word for it, but I kind of looked up.
I think it's Shinrin Yoku.
Oh, is that what it is called? Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is a whole thing. And that's when I realized, oh, this is what I've been doing because this is what makes me feel okay. And then I realized this energetically is regulating my nervous system. And then I understood about like, okay, the regulation of my nervous system needs to be a priority because we have to be out of that survival state. Because in our world, we're bombarded with survival state conditioning and messaging. Like it's all over the place, right? And you can't afford anything, can't afford to eat. It's the climate crisis, the this, the that, the price of gas. Who knows what it is today? There's always something. And we're not, as humans, from what I understand, like survival state is that it's to keep us alive. It's not meant to be how we live every moment of the day, but so many of us get into the habit and the addiction of the adrenaline and the cortisol and all of that, right? And we don't take that conscious effort to calm things down, to lower that nervous system.
Exactly. Yeah. I always invite my clients to consider being outdoors, and I have a lot of sessions outdoors. I just have been working with a client who lives in Florida, and she found out about me from somebody else who was out here, and she said, I want to do a rite of passage with you. And she was planning to come out to LA. So we started working months in advance on Zoom, doing the prep work. And then one thing that I have people do, and I modify it if needed for different people and what their situations are, but I took her out in the morning at sunrise and set her out. And she was out for the entire day until I came back to meet her at sunset. And it's like a mini vision quest. So I've done a lot of longer vision quests, which are multiple days and with a group of people where you find your solo spot, but everybody in the group is finding their solo spots. It's just safer if you're going to go out for days and to have a group and have people in base camp and all those things. But the training that I've had in the lineage of these teachings that I'm trained in, it's fasting on just water if possible. If you need a little food, that's fine. But even for a day, most people can do sunrise to sunset. But the point is not so much the fast, it's the distractions, like you were just talking about. So no phone, all day quiet and just water if you can, maybe some electrolytes. And people are always, recommended to take like some emergency snack if they're feeling lightheaded or something. But you're fasting from our culture, really, and all the things that pull us. So just even one day, I mean, obviously multiple days are even more of a process. It's quite a process. I've done them many times, but even a full day, it's a lot. And some people love it, every minute of it, and other people struggle with it. I've done the full days by myself, and it's a lot just to do that. But what it provides is that cessation of noise and doingness. And like you said, being in constant survival energy, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I think it's one of our biggest health crises.
100%.
It puts your body in that dis-ease place. And yeah, I love that idea of like a fast from society, from sun up till sundown kind of thing. Like that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it can seem so radical. Like on one hand, I feel like it when you think, well, it's just one day, what's the big deal? But it's still a radical choice. There's not a stampede of people waiting in line to go do that, especially because I don't particularly use plant medicine myself. So there's more of a stampede if that's involved. but but in addition, like you were saying, with the mental health crisis in this country, and they're also writing about loneliness as being epidemic.
Oh my God. I just had a conversation with a friend about this. So she's a psychologist and she's on a research project. It actually involves plant medicine. But she was saying, with the whole kind of like aftermath of the pandemic and stuff like that, like people are lonely, and there's a whole multi generation piece of people who have kind of lost the ability to be social. And I look at my kids. One of my daughters is 19, the other one's 21, my son is 18. And they were in high school during the pandemic, and they had a very different experience than I did in high school, that's for sure. And it was very isolating. And I would say that they lack some social skills, especially my son. Like, boys are a little bit different, I think, but he's totally fine on his own. Like, he doesn't really seem to need other conversation with other people and stuff. But I'm like, gotta get out in the world, be a participating human in the world and culture. Like, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do? What's the impact you want to make? Not necessarily like it'd be great, go get a job and stuff, right? But like, what do you feel called to? And then I think you can find your people.
And it's also, yes, and a great segue back to being on the land. And sometimes it can be with horses as well. When I work with younger people, I usually have them with the horses. But the calling, so nature provides a natural call and response dynamic. So if you've ever done Sanskrit chanting, like yoga style chanting, it's frequently done as a call and response. So my name is Sanskrit. I lived in a yoga community in Western Massachusetts where I received the name years ago. And the chant is you sing a line and everybody sings it back. It's called call and response. And then there's also all kinds of singing. I lead community singing, and that is also a lot of what I lead is call and response. So people don't have to look at a piece of paper. They don't have to read music. It's just a call and response. I sing a line, they sing it back to me. Nature provides a call and response. We're the ones calling when we go out, saying, help, give me a vision. That's really the vision quest is I'm searching for my meaning, my purpose. I'm searching for direction. I'm searching for help. Help me. What do I do now? What is my calling? What? And it's nature, but it's also many people feel the divine calling. So it's like, hello, hi, God. What am I supposed to be doing right now? But nature amplifies that sense of there's a bigger picture, there's a greater than, there's a space of unconditional loving and acceptance. It's like you are absolutely perfect just the way you are, as you are. You don't need to be any different. You don't need to change yourself. Nothing. You were created perfect. That's who you are, perfectly. And that inborn in all of us, there is something that stirs for certain reasons. Some people want this, something, some people want to travel all the time. Some people want to play music all the time. Who knows? Everybody's got something differently wired in them that guides them towards something. If it's not alive, it just means that it's suppressed. And it gets suppressed from fear, I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I won't be, as good as somebody else. And there's all that comparison. The thief of joy is one of the many quotes about comparison. And so one of the reasons I started taking people into nature was to be able to give people more tools to find that way of getting quiet within self, and then see what they see. Like, do I listen to the tree? Do I hear a bird and go, oh, maybe you have something to say to me and I don't know exactly how to translate, or do I? You know, there's this whole tradition, ancient tradition of what's called augury, where if when you see a hawk or some other animal crosses your path, there's this ancient system of what that means or could potentially mean to guide you. So it is a way to combat that, is what I'm saying.
Last year we moved houses and our backyard backs onto a forest. And I realized, like, I like to have the window open. I like fresh air coming in my bedroom. And I realized that I could hear owls at night. And I was like, oh, there's owls out there. I've never seen them, but I can hear them every night. They're hooting all over the place. And I was sitting there the other night thinking, I wonder what they're talking about. Like, they're obviously talking to each other because I can hear lots of different ones, right? And they seem to be going back and forth. And I was like, I wonder what they're saying to each other. And then all of a sudden I was like, maybe they're talking to me. What are they trying to tell me?
Yeah,
I don't speak
exactly.
owl, but it's possible. I don't know.
There's a book that's been around forever called Animal Speak. Ted Andrews is the author, published a long time ago. And he has such great detail. And you can look up owl. You can do it online. You can look up the owl and see a lot of the significance that ancient cultures ascribe to the owls, and that can be fun because it might, can really stir something. And then of course you can also think about, and that's what, when I send people out, they come back and then they tell me the story of their day, and then I reflect back the story. And then when I've already been working with people, I know quite a bit about their story and stories, right? And that's a lot of what we're seeking to heal and unwind and get to those places inside that are still hurting, haven't ever really been fully loved into wholeness. And it's that opportunity to just have it, and it always, always, always emerges like this incredible wisdom that comes through the day. Like, whether I sat down and I ended up sitting on an ant hill and I got ants all over me, like, okay, well, what's that a metaphor for? And people come, I mean, it's incredible how things just take shape.
Yeah, so good. So if this is resonating with someone who's listening and they're like, "How I like this has opened up a whole new world for me." What is something that somebody could kind of lean into, or a first step they could take that would help them go down this path, for example?
Well, you gave a great example. It's wherever you live. And I was saying earlier about finding that your own sense of place can literally be if you have a backyard, or if you have a park near you, somewhere where you can get, or a beach where you can get your feet on sand or earth, and you may or may not want to take your shoes off. It's okay. Can you do, even if you don't want to sit on the ground, though that is a great thing to do, just to be, if you need to sit on a bench, sit on a bench. It's fine. It's all fine. There's no way to do it wrong. It's doing your own little forest bathing version. If you have a trail to walk on or a path, like I said, with the praise walk, it doesn't have to be out loud. It can be just silently to yourself. But what I was going to say earlier too is you want to have a mind like with gratitude of including yourself. And so what I often teach people is to do appreciations and acknowledgements, which are a little different, similar to gratitude, just a little different, where you're appreciating yourself first, because most of us don't. And then from that, filling your cup with your own appreciation, you can appreciate others. You can appreciate this magnificent tree you're standing in front of, Like right now we have jasmine blooming in the neighborhood, So I just noticed that this morning when I went for a walk in my neighborhood, I was like, oh my God, the jasmine just popped. I didn't see it yesterday. And today it's like, boom. And then the acknowledgement is really important to all along the way, if you're seeking to make choices that help you feel better, is don't judge yourself for when you don't do it, acknowledge yourself for when you do it. So you're using like positive encouragement, but making some kind of commitment to yourself to do it as regularly as you can is where you're going to see and feel the results, like you said.
Yeah, I love that because, so often I think that, especially as women, it's like that's my experience, so I can't really speak to anything else, but we're conditioned to put everybody else first, right? We're conditioned that thinking about ourselves or appreciating ourselves is selfish. And we hold all these roles, whether it's mother, wife, sister, business owner, employee, it doesn't matter, whatever. We're always in that nurturing of other people and supporting of other people. And I know I struggled for many years with this concept that any time spent in reflection of myself or appreciating myself or having gratitude for myself or acknowledging myself was ego based or it was selfish. I can even remember a boyfriend saying, don't have such a big head, like conceited. And I was like, okay, like I don't want to be conceited. And what I came to understand through much self work was that the most important thing above anything else was to love, appreciate, and acknowledge myself first. And when that was overflowing, then it just is so easy to give to other people. But if you're giving to other people without doing that first, you're just pouring out an empty cup. Like this, you'll get to the point where there isn't anything left and we're depleted, right? So I love that.
Yeah. And it's not helping anybody really, ultimately. I want to just plant the little seed when you were just saying, because we often need to be given permission to take care of ourselves. But the real hearthstone of my work is building that level of compassionate understanding and empathy for self, so then we can abundantly share it with others. Self-reference, moving from self-reference, which is what we think of as ego. I'm always referring to myself. I'm at the center of my universe. It's all about me. If somebody doesn't like me, I didn't like the way they said that to me, or somebody thinks I'm, not something enough. We're always focused on, well, how is somebody else reacting to me? And if we can shift that to self-reverence, so it's only one letter from the F to the V, self-reverence being in devotion to myself. Can I revere myself, which is like the highest expression of self-love? And the rites of passage, that is this nature-based work, is about placing ourselves in the center in that light. I always say it's like giving ourselves the dignity of our process and the honoring of our sacred journey.
Wow, that's a mind blowing moment, right? Self reference to self reverence. Like if you just took that away, to me, that I'm taking that away from this because that's a very significant shift. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
This is so good. So if people want to find out more, we'll put all your contact details in the show notes. But like, where do you like to hang out?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really hang out there that much. Yeah, that's pretty much where it's at for now. I'm leaning into starting a YouTube channel, but that hasn't started yet.
Oh, you should totally do that. You're a very wise woman.
Oh, thank you.
And you work with people in person in California?
I do. And I also have a lot of clients who are all over who I meet with on Zoom. So I'm very available. And even I have guided people who live elsewhere in doing their own, forest bathing type rituals, doing their own, like, I've had people go out and then come back and tell me the story of being out all day. So some people I've never even met in person, because so that it can be created wherever you live. And then I'm acting as your guide to assist you in preparing, knowing what you might do, being available then, of course, to receive what happened. And then, like I said, sometimes I have people who then travel out here just to be in person for being on the land together. And then we do the prep and then we follow up all on Zoom. So there's really no limitations anymore to location. The horses, it's a little tricky. I can't really.
Yeah. The horses don't want to be on Zoom, right?
Not particularly. That would be pretty hilarious.
I know, right? Oh my God, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for this and for sharing your wisdom. I am so grateful. And if you're listening and you resonate with this, reach out to Kamakshi. She's got a wealth of knowledge, and share this episode with your world, because I think the world would be a very different place if we were living in harmony with nature and the seasons and the animals and like all the things, right? So that's my goal in this lifetime.
Yay.
So if you follow me on Instagram, you will see many, many pictures of me with horses. In the summer of 2024, I spent a week at a ranch with a group of girlfriends and had an amazing transformative week. And I have a true appreciation of the power of nature and that disconnecting. I think in this episode, Kamakshi encourages everyone to wander somewhere natural and try out some mindfulness practices. And so I would love to hear from you what you took from this episode and what you can try out in your life. Whether that is something you adopt on a regular basis and it becomes your own ritual or rite of passage, or it's something you just try and you decide it's not totally for you. I think that appreciation calls for consciously cherishing first your own self, because you know what, girl? You are worth it. But then the people and the planet around you. Speak it aloud, say it proud, declare it to the universe, and thank your very capable body, your brilliant mind, and the precious beings in your orbit. Thanks for hanging out with me. And don't forget to listen next week, where I'm going to be talking all about self-care. We are diving in deep into this topic, and I am directly linking self-care to your level up in your finances. Okay? I promise you, this is a game changer. You won't want to miss this episode. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.